What we're doing today is working on replacing the rubber bumper pads and so forth on a Williams Road Kings pinball machine. I ordered a kit on eBay from PCX Pinball LLC, and it has a chart showing all the bill of materials. Here are all the rings. On the next page they have a chart showing the sizes of the O-rings, but each O-ring is marked pretty clearly. It's embossed. These are the tools you'll need: a needle nose pliers, a plastic adjustment tool or alignment tool, Phillips screwdrivers in medium and small size, 2 nut drivers, and a straight blade screwdriver. Here's the size of my 2 nut drivers, 1/4 and 5/16. Next thing is to remove the play field glass. I don't need to show you how to do that if you've worked on your pinball machine ever. Examining the play field, the bumper flipper rubbers look pretty good, but these other rubbers along the side don't look so good. And this one has separated and it's very sticky. There'll be quite a bit of disassembly to access these rubber pieces. A lot of them are well covered by various parts and plastic and runners and tracks and so forth. First thing I'm going to do is wipe the dust off of the play surface. You get the idea. So we're going to start with the flippers. Using a non-mooring tool, I'm just going to gently take these and pry the rubbers off. But it takes 2 hands. So here I'm going to stretch this over, but it's going to take 2 hands again. To make these go on easier, I pinched the narrow end and used my plastic tool to stretch it over the wide end. I see that one of my flippers has a crack in it. Okay, so both flippers have their rubber bands replaced. The next one I'm going to tackle is this one right here. And it's going to take 3 screws and 2 nuts to get this plastic piece off. The plastic piece is removed. It had spacers. It looks like this has had mixed screws put in it. And here's the rubber piece we're going to remove. Williams was nice enough to show the size and the position that this rubber goes on. Due to vibration, these pieces work loose, so I had to tighten these 3 screws a little bit. If you look closely, you can see the size is embossed in this rubber O-ring. Examining the holes in the play field, it is correct to have 2 machine screws and a wood screw in the middle. Okay, I stretched these over and made sure that the sides are of equal tension. While this is uncovered, do a little more wiping of the play field. Place the parts back in position. Again, a 2-handed operation. While trying to attach the one screw, notice how it's sunk in. It's screwed into nothing, so I examined the underside. Here's what I found. It had a captured nut that used to be here that's missing. And those look like this. Here's what the captured nut looks like. Now to return and reinstall these nuts, put them on. Use a nut driver, tightening them just gently. The other 2.5-inch rubber is under this plastic piece, but it's also covered under this ramp that comes, it's called a turnaround ramp. So I'll be removing screws and brackets, more screws and brackets there, and screws over here. Okay, so I removed the friction nut, the wood screw, 2 machine screws here, and now I'm going to take these 2 screws out. Screws are removed. For each of these steps, I keep these in a little can Now the next step is to lift this up and slide it back. Lastly, remove these two screws, take the bracket off. Then this shoot this up and it should pull right out. So with the chute removed, you can see that this one has rubbers we've got to replace, and this plastic was covered up, and this piece was covered up, and this was covered up. So that chute is going to stay off, and I keep my parts in a separate container, and I'll put it with the chute. Chute and its parts. Like the left side, I'll remove these 3 screws and these 2 nuts, and this was where the friction nut was. Now that the plastic is off, we can see that the rubber is trapped inside of this bracket for this switch from the chute. So we'll release the switch bracket. I just released the one side enough where I could get the rubber out from underneath of it. This is all fun to do one-handed. While the plastic covers off, I'm going to replace these 2 rubbers right here, which means taking that screw out. This was a wood screw. Now we look at our rubber bumper, and there's a stack of that size. We're looking at the one called A right here, and on the list it says white 5/16, 5 of them. Now that I have that one on, now we have to remove this one. You can see this is just crumbling in my fingers. Okay, now that we have these 2 back on, time for this plastic cover. It's always a good idea to gently finger align everything and get it started before you tighten anything so it doesn't crack or put a kink in it. One of my nuts here was stripped, so I'm going to have to get another one. In addition, for whatever reason, whoever owned this before me had these funky caps. There's a few of them scattered around, so I will get replacements. The nuts removed, piece comes off, exposing 2 more rubber pieces. The instructions called for a 3/4 inch ring here and a 1 inch there, but these 2 posts look closer together, or they didn't look any closer together than those 2 posts. So I uncovered this bracket, taking the screw out, and it does indeed say 3/4. Next, I'll be removing these 3 nuts and taking this plastic piece off to expose some more rubber. This particular piece of plastic has a finger that sticks underneath the bumper. Okay, the rubber, the 3/4 inch rubber here, the 1 inch rubber installed, and this cover, 3 nylon acorn nuts. With the bumper cover removed, this little ear that was sticking out is now exposed, so I can lift this out. Now in this case I was having trouble with the whole unit unscrewed. So in this case I have to reinsert this post and the screw that holds it in. It's quite easily done. Here again you can see the size, 1.5 inches there and 1 inch there. In addition to removing the decorative plate, I also have to take this particular plate loose and swing it out of the way to get this rubber band out. I'll also be replacing this rubber ring right here. Unscrewing this one and taking the cover off and the screw frees up the post so you can easily change it. New rubber on the post, set it in place. the screw back in, finger start it. Since the screw that holds this cover plate down is also the post, I'm going to set the rubber piece down, set the post, grab the screw, go through the cover. Hard to do with one hand again. Get the screw started and secure it. So I'll just tighten these two screws up. Now that I've secured those two screws, once these rubbers are in, reinstall the cover, put on the acorn nuts. Now I'm going to work my way across the playing field. I've loosened all of these screws on the bumper covers. Then remove this shield. Next we'll replace this rubber, followed by replacing these two small rubbers. The old rubber rings were so crumbled it was easy to get them off. Cleaning the post and now sliding new ones on, they slide right in place. Now remove the left side's forward cover. I took all the screws off already, so we just lift it off and expose the mini bumpers on this one. One more rubber bumper to get is this black one right here, but it's under the upper chute, so I'm going to have to remove the screws, take this upper chute out. When I take this chute off, it'll also gain access to screws that are captured back here. So when I take this black chute off, then I'll replace these parts over here. So I've taken out this bracket, stored it, and the two upper screws. Now this whole unit should lift out. Might take two hands though. In addition to the two screws here, this flange is captured on a metal bracket, and this won't roll out from underneath because it's trapped right here. So we're going to have to take this ramp, this adjusting ramp out. To do that means removing this cover and getting at the screws underneath. And since I've already covered this up, I got to uncover it again. The cover removed, you can now see the hex screws that hold this ramp in place. Loosening the ramp allowed this bracket to slide back just enough where I could get this out from underneath. With the chute out of the way, you can see the two screws, two more screws, and the two cap nuts. As there are limit switch wires that are connected and hardwired into place, all I did is stand this track up out of the way so I can reach this particular bumper. Next I remove this screw, loosen that screw. It allows me to turn this out of the way so I can get to this black rubber right here. And there it came. And there it is. Black post pushed back into place. I'm going to have to investigate. It doesn't seem to have a nut underneath of it. Put this on and put the screws back together. These two screws are back in. I added a washer because it seemed that this post needs to be snug, and a washer will help distribute the load on that red plastic piece. Okay, the ramp and these two hex head screws are reinstalled. There's those two screws and those two screws in that bumper piece. Okay, reinstall these 3 cap nuts, this bumper cover, this plastic and cap nuts and that bumper cover. We're going to have to remove these 2 screws, and as we can see, those are studs, so they're going to want to move when I take these out because of the spring of tension of the rubber pieces. We also have to replace this, this, and this. Notice how little spring tension there is. These rubbers are just hard as rock. So now that these are loose, I just lift it out, set it out of the way. Now I can take these off. Like I did on the other side, I'm going to put these 2 together and feed them down, capturing the rubber pieces. You'll notice that I captured the rubber O-ring in the groove because this plastic plate makes it difficult to go from sitting on the bottom up here. It kind of captures it. I did that on both of them. Now that these are all replaced, and put the cover on. And put the nuts back on. Okay, all of those are back on. Next I'll put the bumper cover on. Bumper cover on. I should be able to just lift it up and loosen the screws and slide it out without taking the screws all the way out. Once again, the rubber piece is captured by this bounce device. Once again, you can see I've captured the rubber O-ring under the screw. I'll tighten that down and then stretch this over this one. This rubber O-ring's on, and now we've stretched that one in place. Now we replace the plastic cover. So now all the screws are tight and the cap nuts are in place. Now the last section are these 2 pieces here in the center. Notice this had a washer, pretty big washer. Previous owner, or one of the previous owners, looks like they epoxied this washer onto the end where it had broken off. These O-rings are sandwiched between the metal plate and the post, so I'm going to loosen each of these, feed the O-ring behind it, and then tighten them back down. Since this particular rub rail only had 2 screws in it, I decided to loosen it, put this on, and then put the rub rail back in place. Notice again I've placed the O-ring, the rubber O-ring, into the groove, and then I'll stretch it over that post. You can see I've stretched the rubber O-ring on. That's a little easier to put that screw back in. Now it's stretched into place. I may have mentioned it, but these screws that hold these various brackets and stops need to be checked for tightness. The next step is to remove this E-clip and take this yellow rubber up. Now to insert the yellow rubber. And put the E-clip back on. this yellow. And install the new yellow. Rubbers are in place. Yellow piece with E-clip. I'll replace those two, and this yellow removing the E-clip just like the other side. All these rubbers are in place. I'll put on the cover and put on the acorn nuts. Okay, so the acorn nuts are on, or cap nuts are on, and the last bumper cover. Next thing is to remove the plunger's pad. I'll take a screwdriver to get it off though. I used the needle nose to get the old one off. Here's the new one, it just slides right on.